Welcome to Wine Soundtrack Canada. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world. In 30 Answers, discover their stories, personalities, and passions.
Hello, friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack Canada. It's Christine Campbell, your host, and today I am in downtown Vancouver, British Columbia, sitting with Evan Saunders, winemaker from Blasted Church Vineyards. Welcome, Evan. Can you please tell me and the listeners a little bit about Blasted Church?
Yeah, certainly. So we're I guess as far as the BC wine industry goes, we're one of the originals. We've been around for 20 years. We're celebrating our 20th anniversary this year. Kind of always been known for our kind of quirky and whimsical labels. Now we're trying to get the wine to stand out along with those labels. It was the first wine brand I ever bought. Hatfield's Views was the first bottle of wine I ever bought in my life. Those quirky labels really stand out on the shelf, but I was trying to make sure that the wine also supports that.
Talk to me about the quirky labels. Can you describe maybe one of them for the listeners if they're not familiar?
Certainly, yeah. So we're in our third generation now of the labels. They've always been they're a full wraparound label. So really, they do tell a story. So the current generation, they're all scenes from around the Lower Mainland. The Sauvignon Blanc is one of my favorite wines in the portfolios. It's always a label that really stands out for me as well. So it is Wreck Beach, and there's a Renaissance.
And Wreck Beach is a nude beach in Vancouver?
Yes, yeah, important to the entire label actually. So it's a Renaissance scene kind of recreated on that backdrop, as all of our labels are. So it is. She is in the nude on Wreck Beach, so they're certainly a little edgy. They're a little they're quite interesting. They all tell a pretty unique story, and kind of when you tie that into the surrounding area in the Lower Mainland, it's a lot of fun.
It is a lot of fun, and as you said, the wines do stand up. It's not just a whimsical wine label. That is a whimsical wine label and very cool and cheeky, but in the same breath, the wines are absolutely respectful and demand attention. How many acres of land do you have?
So we're on the Skaha Bench, which is kind of halfway between Penticton and Okanagan Falls, just along the east side of Skaha Lake, kind of perched up. If you're driving along East Side Road, we're just on the bench perched up above the road a few hundred meters. We produce around 22,000 cases a year. It will, obviously, vintage variation, it fluctuates up and down. Some years a little bit more so than others, but ideally in that 20 to 25,000 case range.
And what type of wines do you craft?
We are a bit of a jack of all trades winery. When I took over as winemaker, there was already a large portfolio. I'm a bit of a glutton for punishment, it turns out, and I've actually kind of even made that a little bit worse over time by adding a few SKUs you just have to see go into bottle on their own. So we have kind of everything, the early aromatic whites on through some of the lighter reds into Cab Sauv and Petit Verdot and Cabernet Franc. So really Syrah kind of runs the gamut, and a sparkling wine program as well. So we aren't a specialist, I guess. We're certainly happy to play in kind of all the fields. It's a fun challenge every year. And
when did you become winemaker at Blasted Church?
I took over in 2017. Joined the team at Blasted Church in 2014 and started kind of assuming a lot of the red winemaking roles, and then took over the whole program in 2017.
And what would you say, Evan, are your main markets for this winery and its wines?
The BC in general, British Columbia is the biggest market. Exporting through Canada is pretty intricate, difficult, and often just not possible. Vancouver is our main market. So with the BC liquor stores also, we do carry a couple of SKUs, so we get kind of broad distribution through the entire province there at 180 stores. But the Vancouver markets are definitely our number one.
Evan, do you have a first memory that is attached to wine, either from your childhood or just an early memory that is wine related that you want to share with the listeners?
That's always one of the funny ones. So I grew up small farming town in rural Manitoba. Wine wasn't a thing. You'd have the customary bottle of some sort of Riesling, sparkling, something on the Thanksgiving and Easter and Christmas table, but it was never a thing. I guess it would have been more so when I went to university, moved from Manitoba out to Victoria to go to the University of Victoria, where I started to kind of see wine as a part of life, a part of everyday dinners and things like that. So I don't necessarily have a specific event, more so just kind of an overall the kind of the social aspect of wine.
Do you have a memorable wine in your life that you have enjoyed? And if you do you recall the event, the occasion that it was associated with?
I think the first major wine event, so when I was in Victoria, I was working for an Italian family, and he'd been buying, so he would go back to Italy once or twice a year, and he'd always bring back bottles of wine. Old Barolos and Barbarescos and Amarones, with the intention that he was going to open them on a special occasion. He had by this time had his 2 daughters that had multiple grandchildren, they'd been married, and he still hadn't managed to find the special occasion. So I convinced him, of course, that just having me over for dinner was, of course, the special occasion. A lot of them may have been past their peak, but just to kind of experience, like 20 and 30-year-old bottles of Barolo and Amarone was probably one that kind of really piqued my interest into the world of wine.
That is fantastic. I can't believe someone was holding on to a Barolo for that long for really no reason, and then you just happened to ask for it, and he's like, okay.
It was, I pushed for a while. It was, I can be pretty persistent. Just say, if you haven't found the special moment yet, what's it going to be?
What are we waiting for, right? Oh my gosh, I like that. So here's a question. Traveling the world abroad, which do you think is the best foreign wine you've ever enjoyed?
Well, that's tough. I think probably in my wife and I's last trip to France, we stayed with some friends in Beaujolais. He's a cooper over there, so he runs a large cooperage, and we got to. We showed up. We're all tired from landing in Paris and traveling over north of Lyon. And he just took me down to the basement, and it was just free reign. So whatever bottles you want to drink, just bring them up. You're here for a week. That's at least 24 bottles. And having the opportunity to kind of go through and pull some amazing Burgundies out of the cellar. He is from Bordeaux, so had an amazing selection of Bordeaux wines, champagne. So it wasn't necessarily just the best wine. It was just the best experience around wine, of being able to open up wines that you don't often see in the Canadian market, let alone being able to string 10 together over the course of a day was pretty magical.
It sounds magical. Okay, so I think I might know the answer to this. Who would you say across the entire world, all of the populations, what country would you say drinks the best in regards to quality wine?
So again, I'm going to go back and forth. If you ask me tomorrow, it would probably be the opposite of what I'm going to tell you today. But my heart goes to Italy. Just the pure selection of very specific grape varietals. They have, the thousands of Italian grape varietals that are all tailored to that specific towns or regions. Little tiny nuances of dishes that people will absolutely go to war over. Italy being on the top of my list, Piedmont being number one of wine regions of the world that I want to go. I would love to go see, go experience. So today I'm going to go Italy. Tomorrow I might go France.
That's okay. We can go back and forth. What wine currently do you have in your cellar that is giving you the most satisfaction? Is there a bottle that you keep reaching for that you're enjoying more and more?
So this time of year especially, and we actually just put it into bottle our own rosé recently, so it's the time of year where the season's turning. You might still have kind of cooler evenings but warmer days, so it's definitely rosé that is most on my mind right now. So flexible, that really acid driven style of rosé, so it's food friendly, it's more than happy on its own on a nice warm patio, but it's definitely for me it's our own rosé. It's our Blaufränkisch rosé that is number one on my mind right now.
And Blaufränkisch, are you the only ones that produce a Blaufränkisch rosé, I think, in British Columbia, possibly Canada?
Possibly globally.
The world?
Even, yeah, it's not a common one. It was one, we have an old planting of it on the site, so it's just early days of the Okanagan wine industry, so you'll find kind of a lot of Pinot Blanc, and the same person who was driving around selling vines, I think, also had a supply of Blaufränkisch, so thankfully we have some old stuff on site. That was always the varietal. I said if I ever made a rosé, that was the block, because it has all of the hallmarks of being just perfect for making rosé, and thankfully it turned out that was the case. But I've never come across a pure 100% varietal Blaufränkisch rosé outside of our own.
Me neither. You heard that first here. Do you believe in a perfect variety, a perfect grape variety?
I do. I think actually I've never thought about it. So that's I do believe in a perfect variety for every situation, I guess. Merlot's always going to be really dear to me. I love Merlot, especially making wine where I do. The Okanagan Valley, from pretty large swaths of it, is really, really well tailored to growing great Merlot and producing amazing Merlots. Balance and fruit profile and freshness and like acidity and tannin. It has so many things. So just on the I guess the practical side, Merlot is right there on my heart. And then Nebbiolo is definitely another one of those grapes for me. It can be so diverse, and so is that haunting, like a haunting grape. It's one of those hard ones to explain, but when you see it, when you get it, you understand it, and it's one that kind of keeps coming back.
Fantastic answers, and so very different grape varieties you've chosen. That's fantastic. So here's a question. Try to put me aside. What is your opinion of wine critics and wine scores?
I'm probably not going to go the answer you expect. I think they're an important part of everything. Even myself, I don't pay too much. If you like it, you like it. I don't care if it scores a 10 or 100. As long as you like it, that's certainly the number one thing. But in a world of so many different wines from so many different producers, it can certainly kind of direct you in your quest for something. So I think there's certainly something there for wine scores from wine critics of integrity and kind of the broader view of what is varietally true and true to the vintage. So I think there's a lot that has to be considered from both sides, I guess, for it to be taken seriously and to be legitimate. But so long as those things, I think it's very important.
I also think that consumers look to scores and to wine writers to help them navigate the very overwhelming shelves in liquor stores at times.
Yeah, it's confusing. It often can be. We get in our own ways. I get in my own way often enough with wine. You speak a different language almost. Of the very specific terms of what you're doing that don't mean anything to anybody else. So you can often confuse the situation or get lost in there. So I think wine scores are definitely a way. And they're not the be all end all. Once again, if you like the wine, you like the wine, and that's all that's important about it. But I think definitely having something to sort of steer you or help you in your purchasing efforts is huge.
So Evan, as a wine drinker and a wine consumer, do you tend to fall towards whites, reds, or rosé wines generally?
Generally, if you looked in my cellar, you'd probably sort of like probably 80-20 reds to whites. That not necessarily the ratio that I purchase in. Just for the stuff that I'm putting down in my cellar to age, you're not typically going to hold on to whites the same way. So I kind of scatter all over the place seasonally. So this time of year, I'm looking more to the rosés, as I said, to white wine, and then and dinner specific as well. If it's a big cut of beef, I'm reaching for a bottle of big bottle of Cab or something like that. But it follows the seasons basically. So as the sun comes out and the days eventually warm up, white wine will become a much bigger part of the day-to-day.
And would you say you're more of a still drinker or sparkling?
Sparkling, I think, goes with everything. There's not a more flexible style of wine out there. It's from start to finish, and even on its own from the aperitif on through. Shellfish, obviously, seafood, wonderful pairing, and through chicken. But you can push it. You can push into. It's flexible with pizzas, burgers, that acidity. Even steak. You can really steak dinners, and so you can push it a lot further. So there's never a bad time for sparkling. So that's certainly where my heart lies.
It's my favorite quote so far. There's not a bad time for sparkling. I lived in Champagne for a year, so I'm absolutely right up there with you. So regarding sparkling, do you tend to reach for and enjoy champagne, or is there another type of sparkling that you enjoy as much or more?
If I could, I would probably always reach for champagne, but that's not always the fiscally responsible choice. But even looking closer to home, sparkling wine programs in a lot of wineries around BC are really top-notch. There's top-notch wines, from the classic producers, the Blue Mountains and things like that, and down kind of through some of the smaller little productions, our own production of a couple different sparkling wines. That basically the only guiding factor is generally traditional method. Prosecco style certainly has a place for me as well, but that's usually the only driving factor is traditional method sparkling wine.
So you and I have probably both been on this path before. We've had that extra glass or two of wine. Do you have a Evan Saunders cure for a hangover that you might want to share with the listeners?
It was a little bit different before I had kids when I could do it, but it'd usually be wake up a little bit early, maybe have a cup of coffee, probably go get some fast food, and ice cold Coke. And you have that, and then you might have an hour and a half or 2 hour nap, and then you wake up and then you're good to go about your day. Now with kids, it's coffee and hope.
Coffee and hope. That sounds like a mini-series right there, doesn't it? What does a non-drinker lose out on by not tasting your wine specifically?
I think it's something to have a really true expression of where we are. So our own estate fruit on the Skaha bench, but also from our grower vineyards down south. I feel like we do have a really true wine in the bottle for all of our different wines, for all of our different SKUs. We're not trying to do too much. We're not trying to detract or cover up or hide anything. We're really trying to kind of take that snapshot of the vintage and through that variety, through the site, and put that in a bottle. So I think it would be a huge missed opportunity on not tasting those very specific expressions. We've been putting in an incredible amount of work in the vineyards and in the cellar for years now to try to really drive that quality forward and kind of the storytelling and every aspect of the wine that is going into bottle, every fine little detail that we're splitting hairs over. So I think it would be a huge missed opportunity to go back and revisit it if you're already familiar with the brand, and if not, I think it's a great chance to taste kind of a true story of the Skaha bench.
Okay, you look out to the vineyards and there are a bunch of space aliens that have just landed in the vineyard. You're like, what the actual hell is going on here? They demand to have some wine. What wine from the Blasted Church Vineyard cellar are you going to serve them, and why?
It's got to be Merlot. It's got to. Everybody wants Merlot. No matter, it's always going to be delicious. It's always, especially where we are, the Merlot that we work with, it's always going to be delicious. It's always going to be satisfying. And no matter what they may think they want, it's Merlot.
Very poignant and very to the point. Fantastic. So I've heard that, each vintage obviously tells a different story. But do you believe that that's true? Is every vintage unique, or is every vintage kind of on the same repetition?
Every vintage, so us being a cool climate, is incredibly unique. We did have a run where we had kind of some easier vintages, but still being a cool climate, you are always going to be faced with kind of unique challenges year in, year out. But from 12, 13, 14, 15 being a challenge with the heat, 16 being a heavy cropping year, 17 and 18 there were a lot of really there's some similarities there, but very specific character now, going back and revisiting the wines. We don't have kind of the luxury, or maybe it's better, it's weird to call it a luxury, because I think it is what drives kind of the story of the wines of any cool climate. The Okanagan Valley, for me, obviously being the one that I have a chance to capture. So it is a really integral part of every vintage. It is what makes it fun. We're not in California where you can just kind of wait for another 7 days or whatever it might be. You're pushed up right against the very end, especially for grapes like Cab Sauv or Petit Verdot, where you're trying to get every little last bit of ripening, every little difference matters. A frost on October 28th is hugely different from a frost on November 5th or something like that. So it is those really, really minute differences in the vintage that actually really you kind of end up capturing in the bottle.
So before harvest starts, do you have any kind of good luck get ready rituals that you take place in or do that you want to share?
It'd be usually just preparation. It's just preparation. Everything kind of splitting hairs on every fine little detail going into it. So as you're going into vintage, so there's always going to be surprises. There's always going to be surprises. There's always going to be kind of a wrinkle here and a wrinkle there. So for me, the biggest thing going into harvest is just being prepared for everything that you can possibly prepare for. So when you're faced with a new challenge, you're faced with something different, you can actually devote your attention to that fully, as opposed to having to worry about any of the minor details that you should have already, or I should have already taken care of in August.
Are you the type of winemaker that walks the cellars and speaks to the wine in the barrels, or do you speak to the vines in the vineyard? And if you do either, what types of things do you say?
That's depends on what part of harvest we're in. Early harvest, I'm good. It seems like everything's going well. The sun is shining. It's warm outside still. And then as you kind of keep fluctuating in through, the whites are in. You start to make the transition over into red wines, and you're still bringing in whites and pressing those and processing reds and getting those fermenting. That's usually when I start talking to everything. I talk to myself. I talk to the wines. I talk to the barrels, the vines. Just it's not usually nonsensical things, because I'm starting to lose my mind by that point in time. Probably just words of encouragement, I guess. Just come on, please.
Thrown in with some coffee and some hope, right?
Yeah, coffee and hope and come on, please.
When you were little, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I think my first, I remember the little project in school. I was a professional fisherman. Yeah, I wanted to be that was it. I don't know. I don't know. It's still one of my favorite things to do when I have free time, is to go fishing. But I was quite convinced that was going to be the path forward. I was going to be a bass fisherman down in the States somewhere, probably, in my mind.
That just leads me into the next question. What do you do with your free time, I guess, other than fishing? And you've mentioned you have a family.
I don't even get to go fishing anymore because I do have a family. So it's now instead of days on the river, it's days on the playgrounds, and putting food on trays and convincing a 3-year-old to eat his raspberries. That's the free time now.
Do you participate in any sports in particular?
I used to play hockey a lot, and then since realizing I'm made out of glass all of a sudden, as things start to progress, I've stepped back from that, seeing enough of my friends with torn Achilles and ACL injuries and stuff that kind of have held them back from work and from normal life. So I don't do a whole lot of that. We cycle a lot with the kids. So now basically everything that we do has to allow for at least a +1 on the back of whatever it is you're up to.
Do you currently have a favorite singer or group, or is there a singer or group over the years that you always come back to as enjoying musically?
That's probably, I'm just gonna go straight 90s here. We're gonna go like Pearl Jam and Red Hot Chili Peppers. Those are my classics, I guess. And on the new side of things, like Sturgill Simpson, and it all gets played in the cellar all the time, just depending on the day.
So a bit alternative. I like it. Do you have a favorite film that is dedicated to wine? or no?
I'll give you my anti-wine film actually instead, and that's Sideways.
Of course it is.
Because it is
Pinot Noir and Merlot.
And it has killed one of my favorite grapes for many a year. I hear the quotes often enough. So I'll give you my anti-favorite film about wine.
That's the best answer ever. So you and your wife are out for a romantic evening. What wine do you order first to kick the night off?
A Blanc de Blanc champagne.
Amazing. Are you a supporter of any sports teams?
Nothing but sadness and heartbreak. But so hockey being my sport, I'm a Manitoba guy. So the Winnipeg Jets are my team. NHL playoffs going on now. I don't have a dog in the race, but it's nice to think that one day maybe.
So if they did win the Stanley Cup, what bottle would you give them from Blasted Church Vineyards to celebrate with?
I could have sparkling wine, of course, and if you win a Stanley Cup, you got to go for the top of the top from us, and that's our OMFG. So it's traditional method sparkling wine, Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, 6 years on lees. Really, classic expression of Okanagan sparkling wine.
Evan, what's the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
Oh, that's a really tough question. I think probably inevitably it all comes back to kids at this point in time in my life. So it's from a couple of different guys going into it. First was be prepared for the first 100 days. And the second was, it's okay if you aren't absolutely in love from the get-go with it's okay, which was it seems incredible at the time, but it makes sense. It's one of those things that you're okay, you're all right, you're not alone.
It is overwhelming. As a mama, I understand it's overwhelming, and those first 100 days are it's like an alien just landed on your property, right?
Yeah.
What is the proudest achievement work-wise that you have, that you pat yourself on the back for once in a while?
I think for us it was with the Wine-A-Line results for us last year was a big one where we kind of first started to see, because you're putting in the work, you're putting it in, you keep day in, day out, you're doing it, your team's doing it, every side of the business is doing it, and then to finally kind of start to see the results more so in the wines, kind of, and with it once again a competition that I hold in pretty high regard with the quality of judging and the merit and all that. So that was one of the major ones for me where I was like, okay, we're doing something, and I think that was one where all of a sudden you kind of, the exhaustion and the effort and from everybody top to bottom, we kind of realize that it is starting to become worth it.
I'm going to ask you to complete this sentence. A table without wine is like...
It's like an empty table. It's a table without wine is like a little bit boring.
It really is it's a lot boring, if you ask me. Name 3 wines that you would take with you either to a deserted island or up into outer space. You can't come back to Earth anytime soon. What are your 3 wines that you're going to take up there or take out there?
Got to take champagne, and then since it's so flexible, I'm probably going to skip over the white spectrum entirely. A big cab, like a big Napa cab. It's there's something about that style of wine. Once again, may not always be on trend, but it's something that just is so satisfying. And then a Nebbiolo, a nice Barolo.
So we have discussed and touched on this a little bit in regards to a winemaking area of the world that you'd like to explore. Would you say that it is Italy, or are there other regions that you'd also like to be up there in your top 3?
Bordeaux is up there as well, but certainly the Piedmont is number 1 on the list. Bordeaux probably a pretty close second. I'm probably going to stay in France for the third, and Champagne.
Well, if you knew me back then, you could have come. You could have come and visited. Okay, Evan, we're not quite finished. It is now time for us to play a little game. I'm going to pick 3 different wine varieties, and I'd like you to tell me a song that you would pair with the wine, with the grape, Or if you don't want to pick a specific song, you can tell me a singer or a group. And then if that's just baffling you, you can go for a genre. So because we've referenced it already a few times, we're going to start with none other than Merlot.
Merlot, so it's got a little bit, where's my heart going to go on Merlot? That's an interesting one. It's not really rock and roll. It's not really country. Maybe something kind of, maybe it's kind of a classic rock. So we're going to go classic rock on that one.
Can never go wrong with classic rock. Okay, Nebbiolo.
Nebbiolo, a little haunting, a little bit kind of eerie. Probably going classical on Nebbiolo.
Okay, and last one, I'm not going to do a grape variety. I am going to say a style of wine, and that's going to be champagne.
Champagne is just dance music, energetic, fun, lively, even with maybe like some big band stuff. It was just big and energetic and just pure fun.
Evan, thank you so very much for joining us today on the Wine Soundtrack Canada. Can you please remind people where we can find your wines and if your tasting room is currently open?
Yep, our tasting room is currently open. You can find our wines broadly distributed through British Columbia at the BC liquor stores and then around the Vancouver area at most private liquor stores as well.
Are you across Canada at all?
Alberta as well, focused mainly around Calgary and Edmonton. That's the majority, and then further east becomes a little bit more daunting.
And what is the website address for Blasted Church?
www.blastedchurch.com.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I wish you a wonderful day. Thanks, listeners.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack Canada. For details and updates, visit our website, winesoundtrack.com.